Hello, my name is Kevin McGovern. I work at the Carolyn Chisholm Centre for Health Ethics, which is an ethics centre sponsored by the Catholic Hospitals of Victoria. In the session today, we're covering a number of things. We're looking at 3 more values from Part 1 of the Code, and we're moving on to look at the first chapter of Part 2 of the Code. The first of the values which we're considering is collaboration. This means that Catholic hospitals aren't simply organisations that employ Catholics or provide services to Catholics, that they are instead a collaboration between Catholics and many other people, providing services to Catholics and many other people. We recognise that hospital care, aged care, and community care can only succeed if there is this trusting collaboration between those who receive care, their families, the health professionals who serve them, and everyone else who is involved in delivering care. There are 2 reasons why Catholic facilities recognise that we need to go beyond simply employing Catholics. There's a practical or pragmatic reason, but there's also a theological reason, so let me mention both of them. The practical reason is simply that there's so much to do. And there are some people who have specialist skills which are not available if it's not them doing it. If Catholic agencies relied only on Catholic employees, there's simply so much that we would never be able to achieve. And so we look to those who share our values to work with us in this great task of providing as much care as is possible. That's the practical reason why collaboration is one of our values. There is a deeper theological reason. That's that those of us who are Catholics or people of faith believe that when someone feels called to care for other people, that's because God's Spirit is at work in their heart. We Catholics also believe that we're called to cooperate with God's Spirit wherever that Spirit is moving. And so therefore we strive to cooperate with everyone who has this sense of care. And that's the deepest theological reason why collaboration is one of the values in Catholic health, aged and community care. The next value we need to look at is respect for personal embodiment. And Catholic ethics is based on an approach which is called the natural law. This means that we can look at the various human faculties and use our reason to work out their purpose and then to try to use them in accord with the purpose for which they were designed. A simple example is that the human faculty of speech is meant to communicate truth to other people. If instead we used our capacity to speak to communicate things to people which are untrue, we would be using that faculty in a way which is not what it's intended to do. Now, in the same way, our reproductive faculty, our capacity for sexual intercourse, is a faculty that has at least 2 purposes. It's certainly about procreation, but it's also about expressing and deepening love. And so Catholic ethics and the various teachings that the Catholic Church has about what is acceptable or unacceptable in the area of sexual intercourse is all based on this idea that we can work out what is consistent with the purpose for which the human reproductive faculty has been designed. What this means is there's quite a number of things that the Catholic Church does not approve of, but an equal number of things which the Catholic Church is very enthusiastic to support. Let me firstly mention some of the things which Catholic teaching is opposed to. We're opposed to sex outside marriage. That includes both casual sex and prostitution. We're opposed to contraception and direct abortion. Direct abortion does not include those pathological situations in which both the life of the mother and the unborn child are at risk, and the only real choice we have is to intervene to save the only life we can, which is the mother's life. Catholic teaching is also opposed to in vitro fertilisation, surrogacy and sterilisation. We think that all of these things go against the purpose of human reproduction, both to allow procreation and to express and deepen love. On the other hand, there are many things which Catholic teaching supports. We say yes to sex within marriage, which is open to procreation and which expresses and deepens love. We say yes to responsible parenthood. We recognise that parents have the task of working out how many children they're able to have and also to make decisions about the spacing of the children. We also support the regulation of birth through natural family planning. And we recognise too that natural family planning can often be a great help to couples who are struggling to conceive. By understanding more about natural fertility, they're able to increase their chance of having a child. Not all of us will agree with all of the teachings of the Catholic Church about sexual intercourse, but if we're working for a Catholic facility, we need to recognise that our work within that facility will be governed by this code of ethical standards. There's one more area that I'd like to cover under this section on respect for personal embodiment. It's a somewhat abstract idea, but it's worth persevering with. Nowadays, when many people think of themselves, they think that their soul or their spirit is the essential them. They think of their body as something which is certainly part of them, but less so. There are movies, for example, where people swap bodies so that a man is in a woman's body or a woman is in a man's body. And often they're comedy movies that involve people coping with situations from the perspective of the different gender. Catholic teaching says instead that both our minds and our bodies are just as much who I am, and therefore that my body is just as much me as my mind or spirit. What this means for health and aged and community care is that we appreciate in a much deeper way the significance of what we're doing. When we're providing surgery to repair someone's body, when we're providing services to bath or to dress or to look after someone who's old and frail, we're not just looking after their bodies, we're looking after them. If we are able to reflect on this and grasp this idea, it brings us to a far deeper appreciation of the importance of what we do when we care for people in all these ways. The third of the values we need to talk about is solidarity in suffering and death. Sickness and suffering and approaching death are a hard time in anyone's life. There's physical pain. There's psychological distress. Sometimes there's social isolation, and there can be a certain amount of spiritual turmoil. It's a time where we do need support. At the same stage, it's also a different time, not just a continuation of the everyday, but a different time with its own unique challenges and possibilities. It can be a time of promise and hope. Some things which are not possible at any other time in our lives are possible during these times of sickness, and particularly when we're approaching death. These are times where we can be close in a particular way to those we love. These are times where we can seek reconciliation if there have been difficulties in some of our relationships. These are times where we can move closer to God and experience a deep inner peace. In the reading that you'll be doing for this session, there's an article that talks about a book written by Philip Gould. It's a book that documents the last 3.5 years of his life as he received various treatments and struggled with pancreatic cancer. Philip Gould wrote his book because he believed that the messages we are giving to people about this end of lifetime are wrong. He wanted to tell us his experience that this was a very special time in his life. Here are some of the things that he said in his book. He said, intensity comes from knowing that you will die and knowing that you are dying. Suddenly you can go for a walk in the park and have a moment of ecstasy. He said, I'm having the closest relationships with all of my family. I've had more moments of happiness in the last 5 months than in the last 5 years. He recognised this as a very special time in his life. He makes the comment, I have no doubt that this pre-death period is the most important and potentially the most fulfilling and most inspirational time of my life. As we work with those who are going through this journey, we will share some of that experience with them. One of the things we might find helpful to keep in mind, and this will be discussed in the article that you will read, is that we often go through 3 different perspectives as we wrestle with serious sickness or as the end of our life approaches. We often begin with what is called the restitution narrative. And the restitution narrative is the story that we would all want. It's the story that says, I got sick, I got treated, and now I'm well again. It's the story we all want to have happen for us. Sometimes it's not possible. And perhaps we have to face the awful truth that the end of our life is approaching. It's where we say, I'm not going to recover. And for a while we experience what's called the chaos narrative. All of a sudden, nothing makes any sense anymore. We're not able to position what's happening to us now within a narrative that looks back to the past or looks forward to the future. It can be a very lonely and devastating time for people. But if we hang in there, we can find our way to another narrative, the quest narrative. As Bruce Rumboldt said in one of his articles, the quest narrative constructs illness as a journey. It's a journey that begins with a call to leave the safety of the unknown and to journey into the unknown experiences of serious illness. Responding to that call involves initiation into suffering and trial, and then hopefully transformation. We understand this quest narrative even from the stories that we're told as children. When Jack climbs the magical beanstalk, he's in a new land. And in that new land there are great threats like scary giants. But there are also great treasures, like geese that lay golden eggs. And so it is in times of sickness. This is a different land. This is the strange new world of sickness and approaching death. But there are treasures hidden in that realm too. There are some things that can happen to us only in this different and sometimes scary world of sickness and approaching death. Our task in Solidarity is to do many things. It is to help to reduce all the negative symptoms of sickness, to reduce physical pain, to reduce psychological distress, to try to reduce social isolation, and to help people to move through spiritual turmoil. It's also to try to help people to see this is a different time with its own unique challenges and possibilities. It is to help them to try to see this time as a quest. What will they find on that quest? We can't tell them. but we can tell them that there are treasures there that only they can discover. And we can ask them to tell us what they've found when they've worked out what was their treasure happening at this time in their life. As we do that, what we strive to do is to help people to build and to nurture hope, to hope that even at this hard time, there is more. There's a lot to cover in this presentation. The final thing to cover is decision-making in healthcare. It's important that people are informed and that they know what they're doing as they make decisions about healthcare, so that either the patient or their substitute decision maker has sufficient information, appropriate understanding, and adequate freedom to make decisions about their healthcare. It's good for us as carers and health professionals to consider what must we do to help people to make good decisions. In subsequent sessions, we will look more at end-of-life decision-making, but at the end of this session, there are a number of questions which you're asked to reflect on in the online forum. And they're questions that ask you to reflect on some of the areas that we've raised today. There's a question about sex and sexuality and how you will manage working in an organisation which is bound by Catholic standards. There's a question about serious illness and some of the supports that might support each one of us if we were called to face serious illness. And there's a question about how you would go about having conversations with people if they're facing serious illness or a life-limiting condition. I hope that you enjoy the chance to reflect on these questions, and I hope that as you move into your ministry and work, that these reflections will help you in what you do as you care for many different people.